Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're focusing on Myanmar.
Yeah, a really tough situation there, especially following that big earthquake back on March 28th.
Exactly. So we've gathered quite a bit of material, international news reports, statements from governments, various organizations, to really try and understand what's happening.
hmm
Our goal really is to unpack the immediate crisis,
hmm
the humanitarian side, but also the political complexities it's all tangled up in.
And some of the international reactions have been, well, interesting, to say the least.
Right. And that leads to the central question, I think. With the current instability, the nature of the government there, can aid actually get through effectively? Can there be any real progress?
That's the core tension, isn't it? We need to look at the disaster itself, how the politics are making it worse, and how different countries are responding. Can genuine relief happen under these conditions? That's what we're diving into.
Okay, so let's start with the earthquake itself. Magnitude 7.7. That's significant.
Huge. And the early figures were just devastating. Over 3,500 people confirmed dead, thousands more injured, displaced.
Yeah, just awful numbers. But then, looking at reports, especially from Reuters, you start to see how this natural disaster was made so much worse by what was already happening.
That's a crucial point. The quake didn't happen in a vacuum. It hit a country where, the healthcare system was already incredibly fragile.
Fragile because it had been actively weakened.
Yeah.
Right. Reports suggest the Junta had been targeting healthcare facilities, personnel.
Exactly. Doctors, nurses, already in short supply because of these attacks. So when a disaster of this scale hits, well, the country was just not equipped.
It's horrifying to think about. And it wasn't just about lacking staff or beds. Reuters also highlighted how difficult aid access was even before the quake in certain areas.
And healthcare workers themselves fearing arrest. Imagine that, trying to save lives while worried you might be detained.
It just throws up these huge barriers to getting help where it's needed most.
And now, think about disease. With the system overwhelmed and the monsoon season coming,
Oh, yeah.
the risk of outbreaks, communicable diseases spreading, it's a perfect storm, really, not just one crisis, but several hitting at once.
Right. Okay, so amid all this devastation, the Junta comes out and extends its unilateral ceasefire until May 31st.
Their stated reason being to help with aid delivery, rehabilitation efforts. That's what state media reported. Reuters picked it up.
Which, on the surface, sounds like maybe a positive step, a bit of breathing room.
You'd hope so, but then you look at other sources. The NLD-IRAG Daily News Bulletin, that's the National League for Democracy's group, and CNA.
And what are they saying?
They're reporting continued military operations, clashes, attacks, happening despite this supposed ceasefire.
Seriously, so it's not actually holding.
Well, the UN itself reported, I think it was over 200 civilians killed in military attacks since that initial ceasefire was even declared.
Wow, okay, that completely changes the picture.
It does. So you have the official statement about facilitating aid, and then you have boots on the ground reality, or at least reported reality, that suggests, well, something very different.
It makes you deeply skeptical about their motives, doesn't it? Will this extension actually mean better humanitarian access? Reuters, CNA, they both raised serious doubts.
How can aid groups operate confidently? If ceasefire isn't real, if there's ongoing violence, how do you guarantee safety for aid workers, for the people receiving aid? The skepticism is, frankly, understandable.
Okay, so that leads us into how the region is reacting. World Politics Review noted increased engagement with the junta. China, India, ASEAN members.
Yeah, stepping in, seemingly offering support in the wake of the earthquake.
Which seems like a natural humanitarian response from neighbors, right?
It does, but the analysis, particularly in World Politics Review, suggests there's more to it. This engagement, even if framed as humanitarian, could be giving the junta a way back from isolation.
Bolstering their legitimacy, perhaps.
Potentially. It's like the crisis becomes a sort of diplomatic opportunity. China might see a chance to increase influence, India balancing aid with its own security concerns.
It's using the tragedy for political gain.
Well, the lines get blurred, don't they? Humanitarian need meets geopolitical interests, and tragically, the earthquake provides the context for these moves.
Which, as you can imagine, has pro-democracy groups really worried. The NLD Bulletin quoted ASEAN Parliamentarians for Human Rights, APHR.
What'd they say?
They warned that these talks risk legitimizing a regime responsible for widespread atrocities, undermining the efforts to restore democracy. It's that tension again.
Absolutely. Between immediate needs and long-term political goals. You see nuance even within ASEAN, though.
Like Malaysia.
Yeah, their foreign minister, Mohammed Hassan, emphasized that any engagement needs to go hand in hand with stopping the violence. That was in the NLD bulletin, too.
And India's Prime Minister Modi.
Also noted by the NLD, calling for an inclusive and credible path back to democracy, and crucially stating there's no military solution.
So it's not a monolithic regional response. There are different approaches, different pressures being applied.
Definitely. And it's interesting, as World Politics Review pointed out, that the U.S. and Europe seem perhaps a bit less visible in this immediate regional response.
Creating space for these other players.
Possibly, it's a shift in the dynamics worth watching.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly. Something else significant happened recently. U.S. sanctions against the Karen National Army, the KNA.
Right, and specifically its leader, Saw Chit-thu. This was widely reported, Bangkok Post, NLD Bulletin, U.S. news outlets, Treasury Department.
And the designation is serious. Transnational criminal organization.
Yeah, and it's important to note why. This isn't directly linked to the earthquake response or the junta's actions there.
It's about something else entirely.
It's about massive cyber scam operations, human trafficking, illicit activities that have reportedly cost Americans billions of dollars.
Billions. That's staggering.
It really is. These reports describe the KRNA controlling areas along the Thai border, setting up these huge scam centers.
Often using forced labor, right?
Yes, that's a key part of it. Just horrific exploitation alongside the financial fraud. It shows how organized crime can really fester in these conflict zones.
So the U.S. sanctions aim to cut off their money.
Precisely. Freeze U.S. assets, stop anyone in the U.S. doing business with them, hitting them financially to try and disrupt these criminal networks.
And there are links between this KNA leader, Saw Chit-thu, and the junta itself. Bangkok Post mentioned that.
Yeah, adding another layer of complexity. These groups aren't always cleanly separated. There are often murky connections and alliances.
It also seems he's been on the radar for a while. The U.S. Treasury mentioned previous UK and EU sanctions against him.
That's right. So this isn't the first time his activities have drawn international action.
Okay, and quickly, what about the UN's response on the ground to the quake?
They mobilized pretty fast, according to their own updates, sent out assessment teams right away.
And playing a coordination role.
A crucial one, especially the UN Department of Safety and Security, DSS, working to make sure aid can move safely, coordinating efforts.
But facing big challenges, obviously. Damaged roads, bridges.
Huge infrastructure problems, and again, that looming monsoon season, which the NLD Bulletin also stressed, is a major worry for getting aid delivered consistently.
So if we try and pull all these threads together, what do we have?
You've got, well, a devastating earthquake hitting a country already in deep crisis because of the political situation, a crisis made worse by the junta.
Then a ceasefire announced for aid, but reports suggest it's not really being honored. Lots of skepticism there.
Then you have regional powers getting more involved, but maybe for mixed reasons. Humanitarian, yes, but potentially political too, maybe legitimizing the junta.
While at the same time, the U.S. is hitting a major armed group linked to the junta with sanctions for massive criminal scams totally separate from the quake.
It's just incredibly complex. There's no single simple narrative here. The international response is fragmented, reflecting all these underlying issues.
Which brings us back to that central challenge.
Yeah. So the final thought for you listening is this. You've heard about the junta's history, the questionable ceasefire, the different ways the world is engaging or sanctioning. How do you think the global community should move forward?
What's the most effective way to help the people suffering right now while also trying to push for a better, more stable, more just future for Myanmar?
There are no easy answers. But thinking critically about these different approaches, their potential impacts, that's crucial. It's a situation that definitely demands our continued attention.